Welcome back to the Better Learning Podcast. My name's Kevin Stoller, and I am joined with Deepa with Bassetti Architects and in Oregon, and we're going to have some conversation about some of the work that they're doing and some different perspectives in the design world of when we're looking at K-12 schools, because I know there's a lot of different aspects that we're going to touch on today. But I wanted to pull you right into the conversation. Deepa, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. It is exciting to be here and sort of spread the word about trauma-informed design as it pertains to K through 12 architecture. Excited to be here.
So before we go there, what was your experience going through school?
So I did not go through school in the United States. I was born and raised in India, and I only immigrated to the United States in my early 20s. While in India, because of where I lived and my volunteer work as a young teenager in that country, I was exposed to a lot of poverty and all of the issues that surround poverty. And that has been a lifelong inspiration for me in no matter what I do. And then once I came here, I went to college and then started working in architecture. And even as my work as an architect, I have drawn inspiration from what we can do as architects to help improve the lives of the people who don't have all the privileges that we do.
So for you, when was the moment where you decided architecture was the right path?
I think that I have always been interested in creating something. And then my family, both my parents are engineers, and I knew for sure that I did not want to be an engineer. I needed something a little bit more creative than that. And then I went through career counseling and eventually found architecture, and I've never looked back since about the time that I graduated high school.
And was there a moment where did you just happen to start working on schools, or was there a moment where you were like proactively seeking what made you kind of go down the path working primarily with schools?
I am interested in schools, especially after I had children of my own. I wanted to create spaces that support their development. I am also interested in public architecture because I'm interested in how architecture as how society shapes architecture, I suppose. So that brought me to public works. And then throughout my career, I have been a firm owner, I have been a staff member, I have been playing various roles within those positions, a project manager, designer, staff architect, technical architect, and so on and so forth. But through all of that, I still found a way to, I think I still find public and especially educational architecture magnetic, because it is the type of work that in my opinion, makes the most impact because we're impacting young minds.
Yeah. Are there certain projects that stand out to you, or are there certain like levels that you like working on better? Like what gets you really excited, or think of like what are the jobs that you've done that you're like, oh, that was so impactful?
I think that stakeholder engagement at a very early stage in a project where we lay down the vision and the mission of the project that then sets up guiding principles for that particular project that are customized to the project, and the locale, the demographics, the use of the project. All of that is exciting to me because not only does it set the tone, but as an architect, it is also extremely insightful to know what the audience is looking for, where they're coming from, what their aspirations are, and what the goals are for that project. So to me, early visioning and stakeholder engagement early on in the design is exciting.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, that's always the key, right? Like we feel like we've been part of a lot of projects, and yeah, the ones that always feel like they didn't land as well, it's because they didn't do that work. up front, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I find that just like you said, the most successful projects are the ones who really take the time to do that visioning work. And if that work has not been done, it is evident throughout the project, not only as architects, but also for everyone else involved on that project.
So tell me more. I know you mentioned kind of the trauma form design, or is that the term? I feel like, yeah. Sorry, what do you call it?
Trauma-informed design.
Trauma informed design, and I've heard that a lot. And I'm just going to talk about my ignorance here of like, what does that? What does that actually mean?
So I'm going to break it down just a little bit. First of, if we're talking about trauma-informed design, we first need to understand what trauma is, and I'm going to read a definition. This is by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association, and they developed a definition. It reads, individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as a physical or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, spiritual well-being. So essentially, all of us have experienced little adverse effects, but it is defined as trauma only if it has an adverse effect. So much so that you cannot function, that you either freeze or are unable to go through life as you know it today because you experienced that trauma. So that is the definition of trauma. And then to address trauma, what is done is the child or anyone experiencing trauma really is put through a program which is defined as trauma-informed care. So the adults, in the case of children, the adults taking care of students, learners who have experienced trauma are creating a supportive environment where they, first of all, are aware that the student has experienced a traumatic experience. And then they are putting together a program that provides emotional, mental support so that the child can come back to a semblance of normalcy so that they are then able to function again and placed back in society, so to speak. So that is trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care has 3 legs or 3 parts. One of them is the adults who support the learner. So those could be parents, neighbors, teachers, administrators in a school environment, things like that. The second leg is the peers, so classmates, friends, all of those people similarly aged as the person experiencing trauma. And then the third leg is the environment. And I think that that's where the architects and designers live or have a role in. The environment has a huge impact. There is no good way to test this, but we estimate somewhere in the realm of 25 to 35% of the impact in a trauma-informed care program is because of the environment. And we at Bassetti Architects, we are constantly testing and developing and coming up with new techniques to create spaces that address trauma. And that is trauma-informed design. It is meant to be a shred book, so we would like you to download it and then use it on your projects when you do your design charrettes. And what it is talking about is, as you go about your design, what it is that you need to be thinking about in terms of trauma-informed design layered on top of all the other design aspects that hopefully you're already considering on your projects. It is a pretty short and easy read. It is mostly bullet points, no long paragraphs, and if you read it through, it should take you less than 5-7 minutes. But if you use it as a workbook, you would be using it throughout all design phases. It is broken down into chapters, of course, and it talks about how you can help people experiencing trauma first and foremost feel safe And then once the safety is in place, it talks about sustenance, it talks about survival basics. It then goes on to talk about guiding principles, which is some of the early stakeholder engagement work that you and I talked about just a minute ago. It talks about visioning and creating goals within your design as you go about your project. It talks about overarching design characteristics. Does your project want to feel as though you are creating something for a community, or does it want to be a little bit more secure? Does it want to be a little an academy, or what is your identity? What does your project want to be in the world? So those are the overarching design ideas, and then we talk about spaces within a school and how to design those spaces so that you're supporting people experiencing trauma. So we talk about clusters of classrooms. We talk about special spaces like a healing room. We talk about some other aspects of spaces like some rooms that can be used in a versatile fashion so that you can save on square footage or whatever it is that you're trying to do to fit within your MAC. But then they could function as a counseling space, or they could function as a small group learning space, or maybe just a decompression space for those who need it. And we talk about colors, daylight, sensory aspects, textures within those spaces that help support trauma-informed design. So that is what the trauma-informed workbook is about. And we can provide a link. It is a free PDF download.
All right. So I'd love to hear, like, going through that process, what have you learned? Like, what's different from the way you would have designed it without kind of having that viewpoint to it?
So first of all, I think it's important to recognize that about 60% of any school population, and across the board, it does not, social status does not matter, financial means does not matter, where you're located does not matter. We're just astounded by the fact that across the board, all over America and elsewhere, because of the pandemic, approximately 60% of the student population has experienced trauma at some point in their life. About 35 to 40% are actively in a traumatic situation at any given point in time. And it has affected them so much so that they were unable to function, they were unable to attend school, they were and sometimes unable to eat meals, not only because they were not available, but they simply could not sustain food because they were experiencing such an acute traumatic experience. So once we acknowledge that if you have 10 students in a class, out of those 6, at least 4, maybe 6 students out of those 10 students are going through something so traumatic that they literally are having a hard time sitting down at their desk in class. Once you acknowledge that fact, then you have to start thinking about how you can support them. Just come back to a normal breathing rate, a normal heart rate, so that they can sit down, first of all. They need to feel safe before they can learn, before they can function in society, before they can do anything really. So safety is first and foremost. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that helps. But what do those spaces look like then? Like when you take that information and say, okay, now when I design, whether it's a new construction or doing a renovation of an existing school, what would that visually look like to somebody who's in that environment, and be like, is it a separate room? Is it something within the rooms, or is it something on some other aspects that you're looking at as well?
Understood. You Part of your question was what would it visually look like? We like to think about all five senses. So we like to think about not only what it looks like, but also what it feels like to the touch, what it sounds like when you're walking through there, and maybe uh, what it smells like. For example, smell could be a huge trigger. If you smell a certain type of chemical, it could launch you into a mental state that you don't want to be in, and so on and so forth. So we do like to think about all five senses as we're designing. And what we design, what we aspire to design is first and foremost a space that feels safe. By that, I mean plenty of windows looking outside, plenty of daylight. Maybe those are skylights. Lots of spaces that look onto other spaces because they help you find proprioception in space, and they also help you locate where you are within the space and how you can get out. Because if you are experiencing trauma, sometimes you don't want to be where you are, and if you know the exit or if you know the way out, it helps you feel safer. So first and foremost, safe, but then you have to start thinking about other aspects which are sort of level two, like does it feel comfortable? And comfort could mean sensory. It could be the fabric that you're sitting on. It could be how hard is the doorknob when you turn the door to open it, how your eyes adjust to daylight, whether there is daylight or not. So that is sort of some other aspects that we think about. And then if you have those covered, then the really nice to haves are things that celebrate your identity, things that, your favorite colors, your favorite cultural icons and things like that can go a long way to help you feel part of the village and that you belong and that you're valued.
That's awesome. So I know before we started recording, you were talking about one example of a district you were working with. Do you mind sharing with the audience a little bit of what made that particular project so different and impactful for you?
Sure. So this is several years ago, somewhere in 2017, 2018, we started working. Is it okay to say the name of the school district? Or we started working with the Vancouver Public School Districts, and we were designing elementary schools for this school district as part of their bond. And we were introduced to their program. They call it the FCRC, the Family and Community Resource Center. And we had several stakeholder engagements with this group. What this group does is they distribute warm jackets and free clothes and food and counseling for families and parental meetings with counselors. And that was the first time that I recognized that there is a huge need for this type of support in schools. And it was really refreshing to see that schools are, first of all, acknowledging that this is needed, but also providing it. And then this school district really made this space front and center by placing it in the main lobby and not hiding it away somewhere in the back closet, and really celebrating all of their students and providing what they needed in order to be able to learn at school, which is what they were there for. Many stakeholder engagements and interviews with this group and other districts and other schools inspired us to then start writing down what is needed, why it's needed, and how, as architects, we can help these students in that one leg that we talked about, impacting the environment. The other two we don't have control over. So we started thinking about how we can create an environment that helps them overcome the trauma that they are experiencing. And then we started, keeping notes, and that eventually became a checklist that eventually became a workbook. And version 4 is right now on the Bassetti Architects website. It is a PDF for free download. And we are still constantly developing new techniques, new references to research and things like that. It is an evolving workbook. It is also a charrette book. So if you want to use it on a project, you can download the workbook, but it's not boxes that you can check off and then trauma informed design is done. It is meant to be a thinking tool where you take one of the topics and you think about how that affects your school specifically or your learning environment specifically, and you, with the help of the workbook, charrette your school during early design stages to then make sure that you're covering all bases as we know them today. But like I said, we are still looking for more ways to create impact.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a perfect example of that. Going back to kind of that early stakeholder engagement and being able to do those visioning things. So we get involved. My team gets involved on the furniture side of things, and we always want to be part of that because if not, we have our own process where we're engaging kind of the key stakeholders. How much do you guys do you look at that and say like, okay, not only on the building, but we have to look at the interiors as well to make sure that all of it's aligned. Do you guys get into that at that stage, or is it something that does kind of come in later where you start looking at the interiors?
The short answer, if I may provide two answers, the short answer is that we do look at the building as a whole, including interior design, not only because interior design is such an important part of any building, but also because within Bassetti, we have an interior design department that is actively involved in all phases of our projects. So that is the short answer. The long answer is that specific to trauma-informed design, we are thinking about all 5 senses, and so many of those are parts of the building that not only that you see, but also touch and feel. And the parts that you do touch and feel are in the realm of interior design. And those are very important for trauma-informed design. So we do look at not only interior design, but also experiential design, wayfinding, environmental design, and acoustics is a large part, daylighting is a large part, and of course the aesthetic of the building.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think that, I feel like sometimes there's a disconnect there, and then sometimes there's the disconnect on, okay, we went in with this intent, but did we ever go back in and do that post-occupancy evaluation? How much do you guys get involved with that? Are you guys tracking certain things, like kind of in that Vancouver project? Are there things that you now can look back and be like, okay, yes, this worked like we did, or these are things like, okay, next time we'd want to make sure we do this, or even adjustments now after the fact?
Yes. We are actively involved in post-occupancy evaluations. Specific to the Vancouver projects, they were WSSP, or Washington State School Protocol. They require post-occupancy evaluations, but the format for those evaluations were specific to the WSSP. But we have done our own post-occupancy evaluations at the Vancouver schools that are specific to trauma-informed design. And it is a large part not only for us to provide information and analyses for future school projects, but also in our development of the trauma-informed design workbook, because as we have publish this workbook on our website, and we invite feedback. Many science-minded folks have asked us if this is real, if we have numbers and statistics to support what we're really saying in the workbook. All of our research comes from other sources. We are looking at the ACE or the HSA, and we're looking at other organizations to provide the initial research. The numbers that I said in the beginning, 60% of all learners in schools today in the United States are experiencing trauma. That we did not do that research. It came from somebody else, another reliable resource. But if we are designing schools that are speaking to trauma and trauma-informed design, then we would like to develop our own post-occupancy evaluation programs that provide concrete measurement of what is and what may not be working so well. So we have in-house developed post-occupancy evaluation questionnaires that we then distribute to teachers and students as young as sometimes 6-7-year-olds to see what they like and not like about a building, or how they're using it, or questions that are specific to the trauma-informed design aspects to that school. So we really have provided them with 2 survey questionnaires. One is the required one that was given to us by WSSP, and then a secondary one that was specific to trauma-informed design aspects of the building. So we have only started doing this work. We don't want to say that by measuring 2 schools that we have cracked this puzzle. We want a lot more data, which is why we're still in collection mode, and we would like to collate and compile it before we can say that we have enough data to say that this is a real measurement. And we have some in-house as well as outside experts helping us with the data analysis.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear you guys are doing. We're trying to do the same thing, but I feel like there's only so much we can do, even though, I do feel like this is an area where, getting some more outside or some standards, or us as an industry kind of doing some sharing is really a big opportunity. It's what I love about some of the, being able to do with the Association for Learning Environments in particular, who can really share that.
If I may add to that, we are also aware of the fact that if we do research on our own, then the perception is that we're supporting our own writing. So it would be really nice if the research or the post-occupancy evaluations were done by third parties and not our own. But yeah, you're right. They're hard to do and hard to compile into data that is useful. Yeah. And standards are absolutely necessary.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for having this conversation, digging in a little deeper. I know trauma-informed design, we hear about it a lot, but being able to actually get into more of the kind of the details of it really helps me. Hopefully it helps the rest of the audience too, because we do have a lot that are in the design community, but also just on the school leadership and just kind of the change maker side of when you hear these terms of what do they really mean? So I really appreciate your time. To the listeners, if you hadn't subscribed, just hit that wherever you're listening from, and betterlearningpodcast.com is the hub for everything. Deepa, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you, Kevin.
The views and opinions expressed in the Better Learning Podcast are those of myself as an individual and of my guest, and do not necessarily represent the organizations we work for, the Association for Learning Environments, K-12, Education Leaders Organization, or Second Class Foundation.